Our next item is presentation and discussion of the updated draft timetable concepts for inaugural service.
Madam Chair, directors of the agency, I'm looking to see if any of our partners are here. Yes, they are. I want to introduce the General Manager of Petaluma Transit and General Manager of Sonoma County Transit, our partners who've been with us for the last 3 years and all the way till late yesterday when we were finalizing this absolutely brilliant schedule. Have I missed anybody? Nobody else? You know, this is really a great day, not only in terms of SMART, but in terms of collaboration and cooperation. As a way of background, back in March 2nd of 2016, if you recall, your board received briefing on what has been done in terms of coordinating or thinking of schedule with all the existing transit agencies. And at your March 2nd meeting, you received presentations from our partners, Golden Gate Bridge, Marine Transit, Sonoma County Transit, Santa Rosa City Bus, and Petaluma Transit. And one of the items we discussed with you is in a very long corridor like ours, you know, it is very important to have a pulse. And we briefed your board that the San Rafael Transit Center, known as Bettini, is the pulse for determining our arrivals and departures, because that's where 9,000 some regional trips a day will take place. So that was your March 2nd. Then in April 6th of 2016, you received presentations from our staff about the timetable concepts. And that's what it's before you. It was part of your package, and that is what was on our website. So fast forward to this new document that you have. And as I said, we were working on this till late yesterday afternoon with our partners. So what this new schedule that it's before you, so please switch to this long one, and if you could follow me, I will walk you through what this really is all about. So again, this product, and I mean this passenger service schedule, is a terrific work of cooperation and collaboration between SMART and all of our 5 transit agencies. This is a lot of work and a lot of spending time together to figuring out how at the end of the day we can serve our customers the best. This schedule that it's before you provides for 4 more daily weekday trips. All along for these years, we said 30 trips a day. I am very pleased on behalf of staff to announce to you that we can now have 34 daily trips. We now have what is before you is 11 a.m. peak trips. This is on weekday. 10 late morning and midday trips, and 13 p.m. peak trips. Our very first southbound train leaves Sonoma County Airport Station at 4:49 a.m. I'm giving you an overall, and then I'll come back and follow you. And the last one leaves Sonoma Airport at 18:49. We will start using military time because that's how our train times it's going to be. And that way everybody knows it's p.m. versus a.m. For first northbound train, our first northbound train leaves downtown San Rafael at 6:29, and the last one leaves at 20:35. Additional items for you. On weekends, we have 5 southbound trips and 5 northbound trips. And 6 of these 10 trips now meet with the ferry's current schedule. This schedule also meets with most of the goals of our commuters, who is very important for you to note, who are competing for the service at the same time, but in opposite direction. We reported to you that there is a huge job market coming southbound from Sonoma to downtown San Rafael and beyond. But at the same time, there is a huge demand of northbound going to significant places such as the Sonoma Airport Business Park, where somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 jobs are. And all these north and southbound need to operate on a single track, which makes running all these trains very, very precise. The schedule also provides for more midday service. In the old schedule, we had 4 midday service. The proposed, the one that is before you, we provide 10. So since 2016, when we posted our draft, we learned a lot from you, from members of public, from our colleagues, and we made those changes. The number one change that we made was you don't have enough midday service in the old one. So we now have a lot of them. The number two was you stop very early. If you look at your old schedule, you'll see that our last train arrived in San Rafael and departed San Rafael very early, and people wanted that to be much later, so they can come southbound, perhaps have dinner, and have some fun, and then go northbound. So we've changed all of those to incorporate those. What is before you is what we've been practicing, with the exception of a couple of the runs that we added. One of the best things we learned from our Sonoma colleagues in particular was there is a huge northbound demand for the business parks. And our very first schedule would put us in business parks somewhere past 8:20, 8:25, which by then the business had started. So that's why you see we have these early times that are coming and going. We're very proud of this. Again, it took a lot of work yesterday. All agencies were sitting together. We were moving things 2 minutes here, which then shifts everything. Remember, we have to pass trains at each other at a precise time on a single track. So unlike buses, where you can move things maybe a little bit more easily, we have to move things as a pair. We're running these as 4. So train number 1, I'm going to now walk you through. So if you could please pull out this large one. Everybody has this? Okay. So train number 1, we're going to use an example, leaves, this is southbound, leaves Sonoma County Airport at 4:49 a.m. And the times below it, so this is train 1, you will see when this train will be passing each of those stations. When it arrives in downtown San Rafael at 5:56, that same train will now, the same crew and the same train will leave for northbound at 6:29 and then gets back to the business park at 7:36 a.m. And that's how this planning works. Is John here? John is, if you see John Kurosh, John is the superintendent of our transportation. He and Dwayne, of course, Dwayne being our operations manager, he runs the engineers and the conductors and the dispatch center, and this is the schedule they've been running, and they feel very comfortable. We wanted to bring you a schedule that it's been tested out there, and it's not just on a piece of paper. And yesterday, he confirmed with me, they're happy. And if your engineer and conductors are happy, then we all will be happy. Because we don't want to be pushing the envelope. We want to make sure these are doable times. So John and Dwayne, thank you for all your work. Joanne and our colleagues who are here. But I also want to let you know this is a very good beginning. Every bus or train or ferry schedule you see, it will leave somebody out for some reason. And we have to look at the bigger picture. Especially for the train, what we have tried to do with our colleagues is start with something that makes sense, but in the next several months together, we're going to learn, get comments, and continue to grow as we get public comments or start experiencing. Some of these rounds, we're going to have very few people on, perhaps, but some of these rounds, we need to add the third train. And these are all projections of the best minds in the transit world, And as we learn what our public wants, we will continue tweaking them. No major adjustments. We want to wait for a few months, and then we come back to you perhaps early next year, share with you what we have learned, and start tweaking that. So I want to let you know, in the world of train, that's what we're going to do. A lot of learning, a lot of listening, and a lot of tweaking, and then figuring out with our partners, how do you make things work better and worse. When we go to Larkspur, then you will see this will extend to now include the Larkspur extension and those runs, and the same thing going north and southbound. And so you'll see that hopefully in about a year or so from now. Maybe at this point I stop. I'll be happy to answer any question you might have, and we can go through some more examples if you wish.
Okay, just a sec. So then, did I miss that? Did you say that train 1 then becomes train 5? Did you go over that part?
No, I said the train 1, and I was following you through that. When it gets to San Rafael, it's the same train and the same crew that will now go northbound. And then when they get to northbound, then now they have about 10 minutes, correct, John? 13 minutes, he says, to get ready to come southbound.
Right.
One of the biggest things that it is critical for us, it's a federal mandate. Our engineers cannot, by federal rule, work for more than 12 hours. So when we have them report to our operations center till they report back at the end of the shift, cannot exceed 12 hours. So that has been calculated into this. So that's why John knows exactly they got 13 minutes before they go southbound. Once they finish their second run back and forth, they're done for the day, and they need to have mandatory rest. FRA will inspect those. Our staff will inspect those, and fatigue is something that we are very, very concerned, and it's all about safety. So that's yet another puzzle in how do we make all these connections.
Dan?
Farhad, could you please help me understand this, maybe interpret it for me? Am I reading this correctly, that in the morning there are no trains arriving in San Rafael southbound at 7:56 or 8:26?
So if you look at southbound, you look at the bottom line where it says San Rafael.
Yes.
Those are the arrival times throughout the day. So they arrive at 5:56, 6:26, 6:56, 7:26, 8:56, and so on.
So there are no trains arriving in downtown San Rafael at 7:56 or 8:26?
Correct.
That would seem to me to be the time where most people would want to arrive in downtown San Rafael in the morning during the peak period.
We don't know that. That's what we have shared these, right, with looking at the capacity of the existing transit agencies and what they thought is their, right now, all their moves going. If that is the case, right, and we have to move our 749, right, and start earlier, then everything shifts. That's part of our puzzle.
And there's the same issue leaving, going northbound in the afternoon between, there are no 17:29 or 17:59 departure time.
Correct. Again, same thing. You have to look at how many cars you have, how many engineers you have, and how many runs you can have on a single track.
It would just seem to me if I have a 9-to-5 job, those are the two times I would want. The times missing are the times I would want.
But if you have a 9-to-5 job, what time you arrive in San Rafael? You don't arrive at 5, you arrive earlier. So in San Rafael, the choices for you, if you need to be in downtown San Rafael to be at work at 9, correct? Then your choices are 7:26 or 8:56. Those are your train. Depends on how long you need to walk.
But there's an hour gap in there, is that correct?
There is an
a
hour
half
gap.
hour.
Yes. Yes.
7:26, 8:26.
So you can run every 30 minutes all day and all afternoon. We don't have enough equipment and enough engineers and now you need, if you introduce any more to this, you need entire new train, an entire new engineering and conductor set. And then remember, one of our issues is we also have freight to operate.
I'm just thinking if I
Correct.
want to arrive in downtown San Rafael for a 9 o'clock start of the workday, I would want to arrive either at 8 o'clock or 8:30.
So we're getting you at 7:26 so you can spend some money in Mayor Phillips's
I'm just
town
thinking
before
if
you
it-
go to your 9
I'm just
o'clock.
trying to
See,
think,
he's-
if we're trying to get people out of their cars, that would be an opportune time to get them out of their cars.
I think this is one of those times when we're trying to, when Farhad said it's hard to satisfy every individual, so we're looking at, the system globally, we're looking at the trains going north and south, we're looking at the pulse from the Bettini Transit Center and the number of cars we have, the number of engineers. Also know that we have 4 cars on order. So whenever we get those 4 cars and we go to Larkspur, then this all gets modified. And if we see, like Farhad said, if we see a huge bunch up of people needing to get somewhere at a time that's a little bit off from this, then we're gonna reevaluate. This is where we start, because I looked at the old, I'm guilty. I looked at the old schedule, and so I said, Farhad, when I go to San Francisco on the weekends, the train didn't go all the way back to airport, and I don't want to get into, I want to get into San Francisco at a different time. And then he had to back me off and say, but that's your schedule. We're looking at the ferry schedule. We're looking at, so it's always important to remember the big picture. But we'll see if there's a glitch, like you say,
completely.
Dan,
So,
then we will reevaluate.
Well, I just want to
so
point-
may I walk you
Yeah.
through this? Let's say 6 months from now, we learn that what you're thinking is exactly true. Let's just say that. The whole shift of trains 1, 2, 3, 4, if you could look at your schedule, that whole thing needs to shift, not just one train. Everything shifts, and when everything shifts, the corresponding northbound shifts with it. In other words, you can't just have one train arrive 20 minutes earlier or 10 minutes later. That train is on the track with 4 other trains. So everything shifts. Last week when we were meeting with our partners, one of the agencies needed us to add 2 minutes to each trip because that would give them more connection time. When we did that, then we found that when we took care of that for one agency, then the other agency lost 2 minutes, and now none of their connections could make it.
Well, here's,
And so that's the issue. And remember, these are connection times for other services that leave. So we can't just arbitrarily move it and say we're dropping you at such a time. There might not be other connections.
well, I would just like you to think about the following
Sure.
question. If there's a choice about where to place a gap in these schedules, having a gap between 7:30 and 9 o'clock with no trains in between in the morning in downtown San Rafael arriving, and then departing, there are no trains between 5 o'clock and 6:30 going northbound. If you were to place a gap, and there nowhere else in the schedule is there a gap like those. Right?
Correct.
So
And
why
those,
would you choose those times to put the gap?
because these are the gaps, and I'm going to have Joanne start coming out where we have to have gap.
I know, but why would you choose those?
Correct.
two-
I'm
two
trying to
times?
answer that because you seem to think this is what I want, and I'm trying to explain the whole thing needs to be shifted. This is very critical. This is not a bus where we can just insert one train here. As you shift everything half an hour or an hour earlier, you now have created, there is no more late trips coming northbound or southbound. Also, where there are gaps, we saw that there are existing bus service that can fill that. So we were trying to figure out how do you balance between having availability of bus service and availability of train. We cannot get everybody to where they want when they want it. That's just, we don't have that luxury. But Joanne, if you don't mind, can you elaborate?
I can try. I can try. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice too. Joanne Parker, Smart Staff. So this was definitely a a challenge for us because we're deploying 4 train sets and they all interline with each other and meet on the track at a certain time. So as Farhad said, if you want to cover, and because there's the 4 sets, between the 4th and 5th train and between the 12th and 13th train, there is this hour-and-a-half gap where throughout the system. So if you shifted them one direction to cover the San Rafael commute period gap, you would create a similar gap at the airport or in downtown Santa Rosa. And so we weighed whether or not the gap hours were manageable in the particular location, essentially, and gave it our, put together something that all the transit operators could create connection service to.
Can I follow up on this for a second? Sorry. So as I read this, what you've done is you've created a midday route south from the Sonoma County Airport on the assumption that that will capture more people than maybe trying to commute to and from downtown San Rafael to work. And I think that's the issue. Understood that there isn't a lot of flex here, but I think Dan raises an important point because it's making assumptions about where the ridership will be, correct? And maybe there'll be a lot of people from the Sonoma Airport in the middle of the day, but we're going to need to find this out.
Actually, it's partly correct, but it's a little more fundamental than that. If you took the entire program and shifted it 1 hour to the right, and you looked at when you would have Sonoma County Airport service arriving then, so train 18 shifted.
You don't have to actually shift the whole thing. You could shift part of it, right?
You have
to shift the whole thing.
You have to shift 4 at a time.
You have to shift 4 at a time.
4 at a time.
Right.
4 at a time, yeah.
Yes, so you could do that. So you
So
go up
let's
to
do
8
that.
and you shift from train 9 leftwards, right? Is
No,
where you're doing-
rightwards.
Yeah,
That's
so I'm sorry, to shift train 9 to the right.
correct. But that doesn't solve the issue that Director Helmer was talking about. What Director Helmer is talking about
No, I think it
is,
would. It
is
won't solve
for-
the morning, but it solves the evening.
well, but the two go together. Whatever train arrives,
No, but we're just shifting from train 9 to the right. So this is afternoon runs. We're not touching the morning runs.
correct.
Because I'm
9,
just following your directive. We got to move 4 at a time.
Correct.
So I'm starting with right 9. Am I
And move
right
to
on
the
this?
right.
And I'm moving to the right.
1 hour.
Correct.
So now you need to move everything
So
below
number-
it.
Correct.
To
And
also
so
one
train
hour.
27, which leaves that's Sonoma. So that shifts something that from 3:30 to 4:30, from 4 to 5, and it's starting to pick up the gap for.
Correct. But then you're
workers.
having 3 runs that late at night that nobody
Maybe
might
we
know.
don't need those trains.
Well, but you have them. What do you mean? We
may I
have
have
them in
one
there.
other
You
thing?
can't take any trains off at the end.
What
This
you're
is the
looking to
problem.
solve too for is the southbound PM commute from Sonoma County Airport in Santa
I'm
Rosa.
trying to solve the northbound PM commute from San Rafael. North.
Right, and simultaneously, you have to solve the southbound PM commute from
Right.
Santa Rosa, and that's where the
Right.
conflict is.
That's the conflict.
Right, so we're going to see where the ridership is and see if we
Correct.
have to make
Correct.
some adjustments.
We
Because
will.
right
Correct.
now, you're favoring the Sonoma
And-
commute
Just a
from the
second.
San Rafael perspective.
We're not favoring anybody because I want to make sure right now,
Looks like.
right, because right now we are looking at the commute hours southbound, correct? When do they need to get to work in San Rafael? And what we're giving them 1, 2, 3, 4 choices of people getting to San Rafael before 8 o'clock. That's where it seems to be. Now they get their regional connections and can go wherever direction they go. On the northbound, right, the northbound commute is much different than southbound. Southbound is a lot more crowded and in one place. In afternoon, northbound is a lot wider spread. This is what you see. That's why if you're coming northbound on 101, you run into traffic from 3 p.m. all the way to past 7 p.m. So in the afternoon, that's why we have a wider, because there is no that 2-3 hours. So that's what, and again, I'm not defending this as being perfect. We're saying this is part of the learning and the best we could do with all the other transit agencies on how do we move this thing. If we shift everything an hour to the right, then the trains are leaving San Rafael, in our example, at 9:30 and 10:30, and arriving up north at 11:30, close to midnight. Those trains, we're not sure be serving anybody. So you fix one, and we now create a lot of empty trains, or not that many. But we don't know. That's why I said the next 6 months, we want to learn, we want to hear, we want to
Oh, I see
experience,
it,
we
yeah.
want to learn what to do, and deal with our partners. Remember, when the train gets there, we need to have a bus, or the ideal is to have buses. So we shift. If we shift and there is no more bus left, then we have defeated that purpose. And maybe Joe and Brian can talk, if I don't want to put them on spot, but it'd be good if they can also see part of the exercises that we went through.
Eric is next.
Yeah, I was just going to briefly mention that, I think one thing we certainly all agree on, this is not an easy exercise by any means. I think Director Hilmer brings up some really good points. I know when I look at it, it's hard to change the mindset of a driver and a 9-to-5 work week. But when we think about this as a fixed route with fixed times, it's a very different environment that we're talking about. And when we talk about, there's things that we know and there's things that we don't know. The thing that we do know is the times that our other transit partners utilize. What we don't know is when people are going to ride the train, and we just kind of jump to that 9-to-5 mentality, which does make a lot of sense. In looking at where do we start with what we know and trying to align a schedule that meets with our transit partners and learn from there, or do we try to base it around the 9-to-5, something we're not we think we know, but we're not certain, and go from there? I would rather start lining it up with our transit partners and learning and using that as the learning point, as the starting point. But you're right, any one of us could look at it, and it doesn't take long to start finding holes and gaps, but at some point you got to start somewhere, and then we learn and we get better as we go.
Maybe that nobody works 9 to 5.
Right.
They
I
don't.
was just going to bring
They're
that up.
working 6
They
to
don't.
6.
And
Very few people do.
When you have a fixed route with fixed times, it changes behavior as well. It changes, people will flex and they won't do the 9-to-5. So those are all things that we're going to learn in the first several months.
Madam
Dan,
Chair,
I'd
I
like
just
to let
assumed
you finish.
I just assumed that the
Then it's
board would
Gary
want
Shirley and then-
to discuss this rather than hearing about it from BioMarin later.
Okay, Gary.
Well, I completely agree with Dan, because, well, we are here to serve the public in the best way we can, and with these kinds of gaps, I'm concerned, quite frankly, that a lot of people are going to say, what are you talking about? I'll continue to drive the car, because a huge number are going to be coming into San Rafael, Novato as well, and up and down, but that is, a destination for a number of people. And with this kind of gap, an hour and a half, right smack dab in the start period and the end period, I would certainly encourage us to at least perhaps revisit it. And I know there are complications, I get that, but this is the optimal time to arrive and depart, and we've completely missed that, it seems to me.
But we're not, though. We're not.
Well-
Train number 3 and 4, 4 and 5,
Five.
gets you there. If you're a 9-to-5 person BioMarin, you're 2 minutes away. So get there at 8:56 or get there at 7:26. And we cannot adjust for one employer. It doesn't matter how many people they have, whether it's Civic Center. So that's the thing we're giving. I'm sorry. Yeah, but I'm saying in our examples of BioMarin, they have 2 options. If they're fast walker, they get there at 8:56. If they like more time, they get there at 7:26. We're giving them 2 choices. And if they're leaving in the afternoon, again, I don't know about the 9-to-5. Nobody at SMART leaves before midnight. But, you have choices. And these choices are this: if you're a 9-to-5, get there 5 minutes earlier and you catch the 16:59. And then there is a 4. Again, this is learning. I want to make sure we understand. But if, everywhere you push, the whole system pushes. This is the main point. And this is what we've been struggling with.
I'll just ask one last comment, if I could. What if you moved 1, 2, 3, and 4, I guess, down a period of time, pick a period, I don't know,
Is it
but
fixed on
frankly,
most of the
nobody's
day?
going to get to San Rafael at 5:56. If we're trying to cater to the workforce, they're not going to arrive in San Rafael at 5:56 for the most part. We may have 2 on the train. And 6:26, a few more. What if we move that whole thing down? Because we've got 30, and all of a sudden an hour and a half.
Very
gap.
good. Good question. So let me walk you through why we can't. Car number 1, let's assume, I'm just making this up, 100 people are in it, 50 people, right? This is the one that leaves at 4:49, correct? And it gets there at 5:56. However, you need that train to be there so the northbound traffic, which is now trip number 18, can get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people to the business park in Sonoma at 7:36 so they can make their 8 o'clock. This was part of, we were all talking to each other saying, who's going to take the train at 4:49? But if you want a trip 18, then you need trip 1. You see what I mean? If you don't have trip 1, just imagine that you start as trip 2. Now we get in San Rafael at 6:26, and we need to leave in 2.5 minutes. Meaning that's all the time you have to get all the passengers loaded and unloaded, and we thought those things don't work. So that's why in transit planning, you have these trade-offs, and you have to see what are some of the knowns, and you address them, some of the unknowns, and you figure out what to do. So that's why we need train 1 is for train 18. And maybe we get surprised, train 1 is the one that people take so they can go to San Francisco and East Bay because they still have a regional train to bus to catch and ferry and go somewhere else, and they need all that extra time.
If I could, how much time are the trains going to stop at each station? How much time? will
30
it lose?
seconds.
Is that 30 seconds?
Correct.
I mean,
And it sounds like not a lot, but we've been timing it, and as people learn, 30 seconds with doors opening, closing is pretty good amount of time.
That's plenty. That's more than downtown Japan, I'll tell you. Surely.
so you could switch that one.
So
You
I
could
just,
switch one
you know,
to right.
while I appreciate my Marin County colleagues' advocacy for their employers, I do have to point out that I think these schedules do reflect our commute patterns in terms of where people live, the majority of where people live and where people work. So we have a lot of people that work around where I work, which is, we have the junior college, we have Kaiser, we have Sutter Hospital, we have the Sonoma County, but we also have 500,000 people that live in Sonoma County. And a lot of those people commute down to Marin. And Marin County has half the population that we have. So I think, you know, going back 8 years, if some of us that have been on the board for 8 years or more, you know, this is absolutely a good reflection of the commute traffic. And anybody that drives south any given day from Sonoma to Marin, like I did, and got stuck in Marin County traffic for 2 hours practically with a big pileup, knows that this is a reflection of what we know about commuting traffic. So if when things change, then we can adjust it. But I think this is a good start. My only concern is, does the train run on the weekend from Santa Rosa to the ferry to get to the Giants game in the afternoon? This is what everybody's
Everybody
thinking
with their
about,
own
you know?
special
Everybody's
interest.
asking the same
That's
question,
your
so
own
I'm just going to
special
ask it.
interest, Ms. Zane.
You know, I'm just going to ask it.
Sometimes it
So,
will.
so
Sometimes.
recently I met with the chair, who happens to be a very strong Giants fan,
We talked about
who
that.
was not asking me that, was
Yeah, and I'm
saying,
sure she
show me
wouldn't."
that schedule.
Exactly.
So she went beyond that. And my question was,
I
how
went to
many
midnight
home
games.
games are we meeting with? And she said, and then we Googled and we find out it's like 70 of them. So
Really?
here, yes. So trying to meet 70 home games
get some-
while you run this service on a single track, we're good. We're not sure we're that good. But having said that, it's something we're going to work with our colleagues, other transit agencies, and try to figure out what are some of the things. please don't forget, I keep saying it, but you know how complicated running trains past each other at a single track and still doing maintenance, because things will break down and you need to have equipment, and provide time for freight. All of that on a single track takes a lot of perfect, like a big orchestra that we're going to continue to change and learn. So we're working on on the desired giants and schedule, and as soon as we figure that out, maybe after a few months, let us get up and running and get some more experience and figure out how to fine tune it.
Farhad and I also talked about Giants games when they have extra innings, and I said, how long can you have a train wait for the extra innings and the late ferry? And he just looked at me and said, our engineers need to go to sleep at some point. So he crossed his eye. What if there's a midnight game? So we kind of went farther. Before I go to this side, Carol, did you have something? No, I'm fine. No, okay. Jim, your microphone, please.
No, this is,
Microphone.
as you look at this, that's 34 total runs, and it's 17 round trips. That's a pretty big day. And I think one of the things about transportation is, and we're pricing the price out as cheaply as we possibly can. You've got to make your schedule fit around what everybody else is doing, and that's a lot of track time. And the schedule is got to be just really difficult when you're only running on one track and passing each other, and maybe freight mixed in with it. And if you're good enough to be able to make that go together, you've really been able to solve something that is very difficult. And I think, as people get used to it, why they'll work around the train, not the train work around individuals.
That's very wise.
So it just seems like that you've really done pretty well to make that kind of a schedule. So
You're so wise, Jim. Dan?
Just one last question. In reviewing this schedule, especially with respect to how things come and go from downtown San Rafael, which user groups were used to sound this off of? Like, were there major employers involved in the conversation?
No, these were strictly transit agencies. Golden Gate Bridge, Marine Transit, Petaluma Transit, Sonoma County Transit, and Santa Rosa Transit. And the reason we use them is not only their experience, but they have that data because they're serving all the other connections. And we wanted to make sure a train doesn't arrive and only knowing the bus left 5 minutes ago. You see what I mean? That's what, and one of the principles that you adopted back in March, was the fact that when we gave you the demonstration, we said in a long corridor like this, you have to pick your pulse. And we picked the pulse as the San Rafael Transit Center. Why? Because it has 9,000 trips a day in and out. And that becomes where you meet with most of those buses, and then you try to meet as many as others. So no major employers, because there is no way, and give you an example. Let's say the largest employer maybe in Marin County, as an example, is Marin County, right? 2,500, 3,000 people. If you would want to meet their schedule, and if you look at your schedule, now if we would meet that schedule, that would shift everything for everybody south and north. And now everything could be out of whack. You see what I mean? If Marin County, in our example, would say, well, I don't want you to arrive at 7:20, I want you to arrive at 8, right? Because I want my guys to be there, exactly then. Now it shifts everything. So that's part of what it took us all these back and forth, and then trying to figure out to use the experience of our colleagues, who've been running these buses, And I really appreciated their participation. Yesterday, they were pointing things out, saying, no, you can't do that because these buses are always full, and you must provide that. You see what I mean? That's what it went back and forth in trying to get that, while we had those other variables that we had to deal with.
Well, I would just suggest earlier than later that we check in with major employers to see what convenience means to them in terms of arrival and departure times.
Okay. Yeah, we will. Yeah. Now I think I'll open it up to the public and see who would like to come forward and speak to us about this new schedule. And then ask Farhad, when will this new schedule start to be tested? Tomorrow?
We're testing this we're testing this already with the exception of train number 1 and 2 as we're finalizing everything.
Okay.
And everything else within a minute or 2 or 3 is what we've been testing. We've been shifting it as our agencies has
Okay.
been giving us comments.
Got it. Okay, Steve.
Thank you. Steve Bertelbaugh with the Transportation Land Use Coalition. With a 90-minute break between trains 4 and 5, I can predict that a lot of people are going to arrive expecting a train and be very disappointed. The same will happen with a 90-minute break between 13 and 14. I realize that midday we need that 3-hour break because we're going to have some freight service. But unless it's absolutely required, it seems to me that just from a customer's perspective, you need to run hourly service for the periods that you're running. And then, in the peak periods where you're really expecting customers, lots of them, make that half-hour service. Now, I realize it's a long run, and so that gets a little difficult to pick those places, but my suggestion would be that between now and July 1st, run hourly service from 4:49 in the morning until 9:19 in the morning. Take your noon break, and then run hourly service from 3:49 to 18:49, and pick 1 or 2 where you need to fill in half hours in order to meet your peaks. I think that's something the public can understand, and you'll generate more business that way than if you have these periods where it runs every half hour except, well, during this time you don't get any service for 90 minutes. 90 minutes is really hard for people to figure out.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Dwayne Bellinger. First of all, thank you very much. This schedule works for me. I'd be going to San Rafael and having lunch, doing a little shopping, and coming back. And we've taken care of the baseball issue. On the holidays, I presume the holidays is the same as the weekend schedule until further notice? Is that
Correct.
I just had a minor question here. Applying your policy that you just adopted in the consent calendar to your schedule here, it would mean that the Pen Grove Parade has to be complete before 10:13. They'd have to move the times of their parade. And basically, my question is, were they notified of this before adoption? Thank you. Maybe I could ask, could I get an answer to that?
Nope. Well,
Dave Alden, Chair of the Petaluma Transit Advisory Committee. I shared Director Hilmer's concern about the 90-minute gap in the morning and afternoon schedules. I certainly don't understand all of the workplace rules, but I do appreciate the rolling stock constraints. But it looks to me as if trains 4, 8, 12, 13, 21, 25, 29, 30, if they were all moved 30 minutes later, it would just take the 90-minute gap and make it into 260s, and everything else seems to work. Maybe there's something with matching up with local transit service, I don't know. But other than that constraint, it looks like an internally consistent and a better solution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Kevin Conway. I live in Santa Rosa. It seems to me that if I want to go down to San Rafael on the train, get there by 9 o'clock to do some shopping or attend a meeting or have a brunch, and those activities end at 11, I am going to be stuck in San Rafael for 3 hours before I can get on the train. So
Spend more money.
so that may be work, I guess, freight time and all the other reasons that that's the case, but I think there has to be a really good public relations effort so that people understand that and don't get down there and then realize, oh my God, I'm here for 3 hours. Thank you.
We will. We're going to have a new website up soon that will explain all of this. It'll be really interactive for customers, train riders.
Jack Swearingen, Friends of Smart. I want to say at the outset, this is a pretty marvelous example of solving a system with many constraints. Your constraints are number of train sets, number of passing sidings and locations thereof, public transit, connector transit schedules, commute traffic, number of train sets, number of operators. I mean, with all those constraints, it's amazing there's not just a null solution, but there is a solution and it's laid out before you. I congratulate those folk who worked it out. I wonder, however, a question, when the Larkspur extension comes into being, never mind Cloverdale, but Larkspur in the nearer term, does that mean?
Don't cross this girl. Don't cross Carol. You're going down a path. You better not.
I
go
should
down.
have said not to mention Cloverdale.
You know,
That will come
you know, up
soon
in Cloverdale,
enough.
we've thrown Mama from a train occasionally. Just be careful. That's all I'm telling you.
What I could have said, had I been on my toes, was that the question is, when Larkspur extension comes, does that free us up, give us another degree of freedom? Could we, in fact, store trains somewhere during the day on the Larkspur extension? Will that give us some more flexibility? And if so, it's not quite the 6-month test period, but nevertheless, it's another degree of freedom that will come at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Jeff Rhodes, Friends of Smart. Looking at this purely from a San Rafael perspective, it seems that the gap between 4 and 5 and 21, 22, 13 and 14 and 30 and 31 are a bit problematic. I mean, I can imagine getting out at work at 5 o'clock and having to wait till 6:30 to board a train, so that's, I guess, inconvenient for a worker downtown. What I'm wondering is, when there are additional train sets available, are they going to be able, or will you be able to augment this schedule and take care of gaps like that? Because it seems that if one were to have a 4A, for example, perhaps it would fill in the gaps and take care of that notch between, well, in the midst of the morning commute and the midst of the afternoon commute.
Okay, thank you. I will point out, I'm not sure if this was made obvious, but there are 2 extra round trips than we originally proposed, so there are 4 extra lines running than what we thought a month ago. So that's a good thing. Okay, next.
Will Nast. I'm a resident of Petaluma and work in Marin. I appreciate the 4 extra trains. I'm sure it's been a juggling act to work those in, as well as coordinating with all the other transit agencies. In addition to the other speakers and Supervisor Hilmer, I think it's a real error to have that hour-and-a-half gap between the April 2016 schedule, where there were 8 trains over the morning period. We've lost 2 trains and dropped to 6 over the same time frame, in spite of the additional trains running each day. I know some of my colleagues where I work will likely not take the train now because I don't know who works a 9 to 5. I'd love to have that job. I typically work 7 to 6. So I think that it warrants further review. One thought I had is if this is going to be the starting schedule when service starts up, I would encourage SMART to do passenger surveys and see if the schedule is meeting their needs and be prepared to make adjustments quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, and we are going to do passenger surveys, so that will be done. Okay, anybody else like to come forward to speak now? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board, and this was for,
So may I
Yeah.
ask you a question? Because I don't want to just leave the importance of what Director Hilmer raised. But if you don't mind, I'll just take a couple of minutes and with staff. So if we would move train 14 through 17, so please look at your schedule, right, to the
14
left.
through 17?
17 through, 14 through 17, right? Is the idea that we would, is that the one, or we're talking specifically northbound? Director Hilmer. So if you were designing this is just an exercise I want us to do, if you don't
But
mind.
I'm not.
No, but are these the one? Are these the one you
Oh,
want
he
to
doesn't
move?
want
Which
them.
one?
The observations are from the point of view of the public.
No, that's what I mean. But which one were you thinking? What would you do? Because
I would like the staff to consider my comments and come back with some alternative solutions.
that's what I'm trying to do now.
It's impossible for me to answer your question.
No, but I
this
want to ask
afternoon.
you a simple question. I'm not trying to put you on spot. You said there are gaps. You identify gaps. So those gaps were which one? 30, 30?
In the morning and in the afternoon.
So pick one, please, because I want to.
Between 7:26 and 8:56.
So.
Arriving in San Rafael southbound.
Got it. So
And then in the afternoon, between 16:59 and 18:29, going northbound.
No, that's not right.
30 and 31. So I'm trying to understand. So it's 5, it's train 5, correct?
Well, my columns are a little offset from the numbers, but it looks to me between 4 and 5, and in between 30 and 31.
30 and 31. So the idea would be that 5 would arrive earlier, correct?
Yeah.
The
Right.
idea would be that you'd have consistent half-hour arrivals southbound in San Rafael through the morning commute. And that same pattern departing San Rafael northbound during the afternoon commute.
So if I'm sharing this with you and I'm having John to look at his chart, are you looking at your chart? Okay. Because that's the brain. That's why I'm repeating this. This is not a debate. I'm trying to figure out how we do. So if we move train 5 30 minutes earlier, then 5, 6, 7, and 8 need to be moved. So do you mind coming up
John,
here?
just
Come on
get a
up here.
microphone.
See, I'm trying to get us to do the right thing. Yeah, let John sit here, please. So I'm trying to figure out what is it that we can do.
I appreciate that.
We'll give John a minute to get his, I know it. Well, we'll just see, yeah.
I think the bigger point is I think you want people to have choices so that they're not driving.
We're following. I'm trying to figure out how do we solve it. So
Remember, this is, the 1 is a train set, so 1 now becomes
5.
number 5.
Correct. So if you
can't
move.
You can't move that one over, because that train set is number 5.
Oh, right.
Understand. So say.
Okay,
speak.
so if you guys look at the schedule on number 1, as you look at the column down, that is a train set. So that 1 now becomes train number 5. So you can't move it over because it has to make that run up there. It's an hour and 7 minutes one way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So let me walk him through. In order for you to arrive at San Rafael at 8:26, please look at train number 5.
Yeah, you can't.
In
close
order
that
for
much.
it to arrive at 8:26, which is what we're
6
talking
minutes,
about,
It's not that big a deal.
correct? Then it needs to leave at 7:19 in the morning. But that train, correct, got to Sonoma at 7.
It's sitting in Roaring Park right
And it's sitting, you see what I mean? It doesn't get there till 7:36. That's the conflict,
That's
is what I'm saying.
But it's,
You can't, it's
Correct.
because you have to pass the trains.
You don't
at
pass
certain-
each other, right?
Everything's designed so that you meet these
Plus
meets with all the
passing
other trains.
It's really complicated.
It is very.
Right. Now, in order to do that, let me give you a solution. Then train 1 through 4 can shift 30 minutes earlier. You see what I mean? So now train number 1, instead of leaving at 4:49 in the morning, it leads at 4:19 in the morning.
With nobody on it.
You can go the other way. They're
Madam Chair?
Okay, we're not going to have all these multiple
But you see
discussions.
where this was an example.
One at a time, you guys, one at a time, board members.
This was an example of a very good suggestion or pointing out the gaps by the Director Hilmer. Very good. I mean, we
Right.
know that. How do we fix it is it becomes that problem.
I have a suggestion, Madam Chair. It may be that I'm wrong, but I think checking with some major employers in downtown San Rafael to see if they agree with my observation would be helpful information. Then you can have this discussion amongst the talented engineers, and I'm very, very grateful for all the hard work that went into this. I would never want to discount that. But I think I'm pointing out in an observation something that you should check with users. This is akin to having software designed and then only tested on other software engineers. You need to check with the users and make sure that you're identifying the right choices for them so that they're going to want to use the train instead of driving. I think the principle here is more important than rushing around to an answer within this board meeting. I may be wrong. But if I were working at BioMarin and living in Petaluma, I would want to arrive in San Rafael somewhere in between 7:30 and 9.
And you arrive at 7:26.
I mean, I would want choices to arrive either at
Okay,
8 or
yeah.
8:30 too.
So you have one choice in that example. You're arriving at 7:26. You don't have multiple choice past that because then it shifts everything.
But I'm not going to call you to ask you to explain my choices. I'm just going to choose to get in my car.
That's why I mentioned that if we focus on individual preferences, there is no way.
As I say, I may be wrong. Check with a few groups that would represent typical users at BioMarin or the county, or that would be just a suggestion.
Sure.
It may require no change at all if I'm wrong. I would love it if I was wrong.
Okay,
But you're going to hear about it
sorry.
if I'm right.
Okay, Eric?
I don't disagree with any of the comments you're making. With regards to reaching out to there's reaching out to potential users and there's reaching out to actual users. And my understanding of one of the reasons why we were doing free fares and then discounted fares and surveys during those first few months is that it will give us the opportunity to reach out to actual users. Now, there might be some that don't even get on it because it doesn't meet their schedule and we don't reach those people, but I do think that we have a feedback mechanism in place before we go out and start charging full fare from day one, that we can actually get that feedback. It is a really tough exercise. I think this is very similar to when we were talking about the fare schedule. It's, you don't know what you don't know. You do have to pick a starting point at some point and get the feedback. So I think what's most important is that we continue to get that feedback. If we can get it beforehand, that's great, but I think getting it from the actual users as they're riding it, as they're trying to catch the train, or as they miss that 5 o'clock train and now they have to wait an hour and a half for the next one, that's going to be really good feedback. And I can guarantee you, I'm sure we're going to get some of that. Can we quantify how much we're going to get and what impact it would have on people and the others? That's what we need to look at it holistically. So I'm interested in getting that feedback from the actual riders once we start, but at some point you do have to start somewhere. It is not an easy choice for us.
Through the chair, I totally agree with that. I just always pay attention to, when I looked at this, those two gaps stood out with me within 10 seconds of looking at the entire page. To me, that matters.
Okay. So noted, and thank you for your comments and focusing us in on that. And I know there will be more discussion and surveys, and we'll see. We can't speak from the audience, so, okay, sorry. Okay, do you have any concluding?
Well, then I want to make sure we're on the same page. We need to start with a schedule, right? And for last several months, we had a draft schedule that we received comments that translated into this. Our view is we're gonna, unless you tell me otherwise, this is what we're gonna test. Then we're gonna get feedback. And the feedback's gonna be terrific, great, and here are the problem areas. That's what I said. If we can tweak, we tweak. If it's a major shift, right, then we have to see how do you make the major shift. You see what a reasonable suggestion, just what we went through, was very reasonable. I mean, we're trying to close a gap, but it created a different solution. As we hire more people, and as we have more trained, and as we gain more actual users, as Director Lucan said, now we can start making more and more and more changes. I think for the next year, we're going to learn more and figuring out what are some of these things. So that's what I said at the beginning. But we need to start somewhere because this is what we're testing. This is what we open up with. And as you mentioned, half price and then full price past Labor Day. But we'll continue to give you feedback. And if you're right, and it's very logical, these gaps, and we're getting 10, 20, 30, no. But if we're getting hundreds of calls, we come in and figure out what are the options and share those options with you. But again, everything needs to shift together given all those different variables that we have to play with. So unless you tell me otherwise, this is the plan that we're planning when we open up for you. To start doing and then keep informing you what's going on. We're gearing up to do on the train survey, on the website survey, many different types of surveys so we can learn from everybody how do we do a better job.
And I would just like to thank the transit agencies that worked with us. This isn't our first schedule. I think it's our fourth. We had initial schedules, years ago, and now this is pretty tight, but we will remember what you said, Dan. We'll remember that as we go forward and see what can be done, and you never know.
Madam Chairman, you want some kind of action on this to take it on as an interim schedule or?
It's just feedback.
Your direction, if this is what the direction I get is for now, this is good, proceed, keep getting feedback, keep looking at it, and keep reporting to us. Or this is no good, this is no good, we really have problem with this, come back with something different.
Next question.
Which shifts our schedule, just so you know. Sorry.
Gary?
Thanks. I'm sitting here with the impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, my impression is that once this starts, nothing can't be changed. Certainly this is one, but I suspect that it's going to not change easily. And I'm curious about the testing periods now. When people get accustomed to a certain pattern, we start changing that, coming back to the customer, it's going to be even more disruptive. So my sense is that while we can sit here and say, well, let's give it a try and we'll change it based on feedback, we're getting feedback from those that are riding. I'm not sure that that's the best feedback if we're trying to alter. That's what's in place. So I too would encourage, let's think more about the customer and match. And if this is a match, fine. If it's not a match, I would suggest we change it before we start service. And that's not so very long. It's a month. So we just now presented it, so we have to react to it. But I would certainly encourage us to get started right. And if this is the place, fine. If it's not, then let's change it before we start, rather than look like whatever.
Okay. So,
I want to add to that, because I disagree with Gary, and I just want to say, I think it's really makes sense to make those minor adjustments after we get started, and we really get to see, where the commute needs are. And I think it's really hard to determine it right now, and I think you guys did the best job you could, and I think you did a great job. So I say, wait, let's find out where the needs are. We can always make adjustments after we start. So.
and again, I'll just thank the transit agencies and the staff and everybody that worked so hard on multiple schedules. This isn't the first one, this is the third or fourth. And based on feedback, this one was changed and 2 more round trips were added. So, and because there were not enough late trains at night, for example. So, so there were changes made based on that. So are we ready to move on to our final item, which is announcement of the next meeting?